Closet, a Todd Mills mystery. Book 1. Author R.D. Zimmerman. Publisher Scribble Pub. Minneapolis, Minnesota. Narrator Eric Aust. Chapter 16. Some 30 minutes later, Todd was driving along Lake of the Isles Parkway when he let his Grand Cherokee drift to a halt on the side of the road. Staring across the long, narrow part of Lake of the Isles, his thoughts drifted. How many miles had Michael and he jogged around this lake? Hundreds? It wasn't quite 3 miles around, and over the past 2 years they had run this course at least 3 times a week. Sometimes they made several loops, while in the summer they'd often do Isles, Calhoun, and Harriet. All 3 lakes, well, they had only run that much once or twice a summer. And that was plenty, certainly enough to keep them both trim and fit, which were the silent expectations of the gay community and the spoken expectations of the television industry. Michael was everywhere down here. He knew every inch of the lakes, all these houses, and so many of the people. Michael had tons of friends in town, and he'd seen most of them down here. To walk or jog around one of the lakes was the quintessential Minneapolis experience. Being a native Minnesotan, Michael had played hockey as a kid, and so in the winter he was often down here at night on the huge rink, reveling in the frigid air. Michael loved this place, this city. Oz on the Tundra, that's what he called it. He knew it all, the parks, the theaters, the downtown buildings, and the restaurants. And he hated the Mega Mall, would rant and rave about that blood-sucking giant tick of a suburban shopping center that existed, preyed off Minneapolis, yet contributed no tax dollars to the city itself. So Michael knew a lot about the Twin Cities, as well as life in general, but did he know that night he was murdered how much he meant to Todd? Staring across the dark waters and off into the night, that was all Todd wanted, just to know that Michael knew. Jeff's sharp criticisms echoed in Todd's mind. Sure, Jeff was right on some accounts. Todd had been a shit, much too self-absorbed, but Jeff was only looking at the outer world. He wasn't seeing how Michael and he had connected on the inner. How together they were, bumbling and struggling to find something quite profound. How they were almost there. Todd wanted to be close to Michael, and without thinking he started up his Cherokee, put it in gear, and started driving along the narrow parkway at the narrow end of the lake. He took a right on Franklin and swerved around and up a hill, passing colossal houses after colossal house. Like a homing pigeon, he turned right at the first stop sign, headed south on Irving and passing the Mondales. He braked at 22nd Street and saw Lake of the Isles again appear off to the right and continued up to 23rd, where he took a left. He was on automatic pilot, driving the same route he'd taken almost every day after work for these past few years. But like that part of Todd's life, Michael's house was now dark. Todd slowly cruised by the large white duplex, saw the blackened windows. He hadn't been in there since the night of the fight. Was the place still sealed? He drove on for another block, pulled over, and took his cellular phone from its holster. What were their names? Right, he remembered, and he called information and got the number of the couple who lived upstairs for Michael. Todd dialed, the phone rang, but there was no answer. No answering machine or voicemail either, which was unusual for 2 fledgling lawyers. So maybe they had moved out, as Janice had yesterday suggested was a strong possibility. In any case, there didn't seem to be anyone home. So maybe he could get in without the police being called. He took a small flashlight from his glove compartment and left his Cherokee right there, climbing out and proceeding down the sidewalk. Thinking better of it, he cut around to the alley, certain that there was less chance of being seen back there. Slipping through the darkness, he moved along quickly and soon reached Michael's place, where he ascertained that the whole building was completely dark. Feeling more as if he were breaking and entering than coming home, Todd let himself in the rear door, which he shut and locked behind him. He stood completely still, listened for any movement, but could detect nothing. He reached for a light switch, thought better of it. Certainly the next-door neighbors were jumpy, and certainly they'd been told to call the police if they noticed anything strange. With that in mind, Todd flicked on his flashlight and proceeded up the 3 steps to Michael's back door. It was hopeless, though, for a new hasp had been screwed into the door and a police padlock slapped in place. He stood there thinking, surely the front door would be similarly sealed. He turned the corner, aimed the flashlight up the back stairs to the second floor apartment, then turned around and followed the stairs down and past the outer door. Continuing down the next flight, Todd descended into the basement, a cavernous space cut up by old coal bins, storage lockers, and a vast cedar closet. Running the flashlight from left to right, he saw the paint Michael had used last year when he redid the bathroom. Michael's skis, Michael's bicycle, Michael's Christmas tree stand, and Michael's old table, the oak one that he bought and intended to refinish but never did. This would not be fun, thought Todd. At some point, Maggie and he were going to have to go through all of this. He continued around the gas boiler and came to yet another staircase. One of the former owners had planned to build an extra bedroom or something down here. But aside from gutting a closet upstairs and dropping down a set of stairs, no progress had been made. Michael and Todd had in fact talked about building an office down here if and when Todd moved in, but like so many other plans, that wasn't going to happen. And now he aimed his light up the dusty stairs. Just as he'd hoped, this entry into the apartment had been overlooked, and there was no padlock. Pulling the apartment key from his pocket, Todd proceeded up the stairs and unlocked the door, which swung open with ease. In an instant, he was inside Michael's apartment, perusing the dark space with the small beam of light and facing the stain of death. It was the first thing that his flashlight fell upon. A big splash of darkened blood on the wall, a huge pool on the oak floor. The shock overwhelmed Todd, and he couldn't move. Of course, it was all dry, every little splatter and drip mark that streaked the wall, as well as the vast puddle where Michael had fallen, either dead or dying. Oh shit, he thought, and hurried through the kitchen, bumping into a chair as he rushed to the sink. His stomach swirled and a huge wave threatened to rise out of his body. He gagged, caught his breath, and then turned on the cold water. After a moment, he splashed his face. Next, took a sip of water. He'd seen death before, a number of times actually. He'd seen it on maybe 60% of the stories he'd done for the Crime Eye, from gang assassinations to butchered lovers. But that blood had always been so distant, so remote. Avoiding the back hall, he caught his breath and exited the kitchen via the other door. Everything was so quiet, so deathly still, and he stood on the edge of the dining room, slowly running the flashlight over the dark wood dinner table, the chairs, and the broken sideboard. The large piece of furniture was still tipped over. The wood cracked and splintered. A wave of shame rushed through Todd. He moved forward, scanning the floor. Where were the shards of china? Someone had obviously cleaned up. No, that wasn't what had happened. The crime lab had gone over all of this, right? They'd probably gathered every little shard of Michael's grandmother's china, hoping to find a trace of blood, a bit of material. Turning, Todd saw fingerprint dust on various parts of the smashed sideboard. Shaking his head, he couldn't believe he'd done all this damage, broken it all in such a fit of rage and frustration. The scene screamed out of his memory. Todd flicked off the small flashlight and stood there in a dark, transfixed by memories of his shouting, his fury, his threatening gestures. The violent act. And, God, so much noise. When he'd dumped that piece of furniture, the whole house had shook. It was no wonder that he'd scared the hell out of Michael, and no surprise that Michael had gone down to see Jeff, seeking counsel and advice. Moving into the living room, Todd peered through the dark and saw the black couch where Michael had sat when he'd stated his ultimatum, studying the wall next to the fireplace. He saw the champagne stain on the white bricks, heard the explosion of glass and liquid all over again. Jeff had undoubtedly advised Michael to leave Todd, because, of course, Jeff had always seen how much Todd withheld from Michael. The problem, Todd now clearly understood, was that during the day and the light he felt acted, was perceived himself as straight. Wasn't that what people had expected of him? Wasn't he fulfilling their expectations? Good God, what a fool he'd been. And to think he'd exploded over Michael's request to come to a fucking Christmas party. A wretchedly boring one at that, with nothing but something creaked. Todd caught his breath, stood there in the dark living room. What was that? It sounded like a floorboard. Oh, shit, he thought, listening for something, anything. Maybe it was just the heat coming on. Maybe it was cold enough outside to activate the thermostat in here. It could be. Or it could just be a rodent. No, that had been a footstep. Someone else was in Michael's apartment. His heart bolted. His eyes flashed from side to side. But he didn't move. Someone had come into this apartment before and killed Michael. Someone had come into Todd and Michael's life and ruined it. And that person, Todd sensed, was now hiding somewhere in this dark apartment. But why? To recover an incriminating item? Fear began to commingle with anger. He glanced at the set of fireplace tools and slowly reached over and took the iron poker. Michael's killer, the man who destroyed their world, was here. Todd slowly began to cross the living room, slipping his small flashlight into the jacket pocket. He gripped the poker with both hands and raised it head high. His muscles tightened as he reached the hallway that led to the bedroom and office. He heard something else. The faint rustling of clothing. Someone was back here. But where? The bedroom? Michael's office? The bathroom? Todd came around the corner, moving with constrained yet absolute purpose. He came to Michael's bedroom, paused in deep concentration, in the faint grayish light seeping through the windows. Todd saw the large bed he and Michael had shared and made love in, covered with a smooth bedspread. The closet door in the corner was shut tight, the dresser undisturbed. He inched down the hall, one grave, hushed step at a time. The nightlight in the bathroom was on, illuminating the small room with a yellowish glow. The door was open all the way, pressed back against the wall, so clearly there was no one behind it. The tub? Todd took a half step into the room. No one lurking behind the shower curtain either, which meant, he thought, easing back into the hallway. The intruder was in Michael's office. Could Todd possibly have him cornered? He was focusing on the next room when he heard it, darting steps behind him. Shit! Whoever was here had gone back through the kitchen, the dining and living rooms, and was now coming at Todd from behind. He spun around, tried to swing the poker, but the hall was too narrow, and the poker caught the wall just as the figure came thrusting into him, grabbing him by the chest, twisting him around. Todd tried to jab him with his weapon, but the stranger swung out, punched Todd's arm, and then grabbed Todd's fist and smashed it against a door jamb. The iron poker dropped to the wooden floor. The man was terribly strong, and he grunted, shouted something, but Todd exploded with fury, hurling him back down the hall. The guy stumbled, and Todd was flying forward. The intruder pulled to the side, ducking into Michael's bedroom. Todd charged in, grappling to catch him by the shoulder. But the intruder spun around, yelled again, and rammed a fist into Todd's stomach. As the wind shot out of him, Todd stumbled. The guy caught Todd by one arm and threw him forward onto the floor. In one huge heave, he pounced on Todd's back, grabbing Todd's right arm and twisted around, pinning it behind Todd's back. Pull it! Todd thrashed to the side, felt the pang zing up his arm, down his back. He tried to jerk himself free, but the pain cut even more deeply and sharply. Stop it! Shouted the man, straddling Todd and holding him firmly down. You're going to hurt yourself, you idiot! Like some animal who'd been chased wildly through the woods and who now knew it was hopeless, Todd lay there completely still, awaiting his fate. It's me, asshole! Todd turned his head slightly, glanced upward, saw a somewhat familiar shape looming above him in the dark. What? It's me, Rawlings. Ah, fuck. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.